The Buccaneers are making more signings, including one that may be a starter in 2024. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Monday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with my everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show, become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, plus one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Head to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. We will hear from Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants about new Bucs offensive lineman Ben Bredeson, and it is the most epic mock draft Monday that we have had so far this season. But let's get caught up on the moves that happened since the last time we talked. So right before I went live on Friday, the Buccaneers signed offensive lineman Ben Bredeson, who we are going to talk about more in a little bit. But the Bucs also made some other moves on Friday after that show had ended. So first, they're bringing in another offensive lineman from the NFC East, agreeing to a one-year deal with former Eagles offensive lineman Sua Opeta. Then they are bringing back two of their own, agreeing to deals with quarterback John Wolford and swing tackle Justin School. So let's start with Opeta. He has been in the league since 2020, but has started just 10 games over the course of those 4 years. Opeta has played both tackle and guard. So what you have here is a versatile depth player that can fill in a few different roles if needed for the Buccaneers. We know how much Jason Light and Todd Bowles love those backup offensive linemen that can play multiple positions. And a big reason for that is that it allows them to carry fewer offensive linemen on the 53-man roster and open up roster spots for other positions like cornerback, safety, wide receiver, those position groups that we see so many guys over the course of the last few years get injured and miss time. So Opeta is the kind of player that the Buccaneers look for, that they need as far as providing depth at multiple positions. He can step in at tackle, he can step in at guard, and then they can carry an extra corner and an extra wide receiver, or an extra corner and an extra safety if they can find a few more of them. But this is a Jason Light specialty, getting these depth players that can play multiple positions. But someone else that provides some depth for the Bucs is Justin School, who was with the team in 2022 and in 2023, and he can play both tackle positions. So again, more depth along the offensive line with a guy that can play multiple positions. Now, he's not quite as versatile as Opeta, but being able to step in at either tackle spot is going to open up things for Opeta, who can play across the interior of the offensive line and allow other guys to fill in at other positions of need as well. And of course, I say all this hoping that the Buccaneers don't have to utilize Opeta or School to step in, because hopefully the offensive line stays healthy and they're all intact and the starters are the starters all year long. But we know that those guys go through an absolute grind. They get beaten up and beaten down throughout the course of the season, which is why Jason Light loves finding these offensive linemen that are so versatile. And then something that I mentioned on Friday's episode, for those of you that were able to catch it, was that the Bucs still needed another quarterback. I went through kind of a roster reset as to what the Bucs had done, what they still need to do, what are still some positions of need, and I listed quarterback as one of those positions of need. Especially since Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask are the only two in the quarterback room right now. But I figured they would go with a veteran backup rather than draft somebody because of the situation that they have already at the quarterback position. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're bringing back John Wolford, who Baker loves. And, he's a guy that brings in a lot of help to Baker and Kyle, especially in the film room. And, it's worth noting, maybe not a huge deal, but I think this is certainly something that played into Wolford's favor. He has played for Liam Cohen before out in Los Angeles. So here's a guy who's a inexpensive, veteran, experienced backup quarterback. He knows exactly what his role is, and he has already familiarized himself with Liam Cohen from their time in Los Angeles. And not only is he going to help Baker and Kyle Trask in the film room, but now he can also help some other guys, come along and get a grasp on what Liam Cohen is going to do offensively. He can speed up the process of learning the new system, even though we believe that Cohen's system is going to be pretty similar to what Canales did last year. Having another player around that has played for him in the past and has kind of an already better idea of what the offense is going to look like compared to those that have not played for Cohen, it's going to help speed things along during installation this offseason. It's also worth mentioning that the Bucs are having a meeting with former Lions quarterback Tavier Thomas. Now, that meeting may have already happened. Jeremy Fowler reported that this meeting was going to take place back on March 16th on Friday, but there's no word as to when that meeting was actually going to happen, if it has already happened, or what will come of it. Thomas would simply be a depth piece in the secondary and a potential special teamer. You have the addition of Bryce Hall, who I believe is going to compete for that slot corner job with Christian Izien. Then you have Zion McCollum and Jamel Dean locked in as your starters as of now. Thomas would simply be here in a backup capacity. It's also worth noting that I did check before I went live that Over the Cap currently has the Buccaneers with a little over $9.3 million in cap space. They have taken the Russell Gage contract off the books, and they have included the Jordan Whitehead and Greg Gaines signings. However, Levante David, Bryce Hall, and then those other signings that I just mentioned, Wolford, Bredeson, Opeta, and School are not accounted for on Over the Cap quite yet, but there's still plenty of wiggle room for the Bucs with the extensions of Winfield and Wirfs, plus any potential moves with Vita Vea and Chris Godwin. But without those 6 contracts accounted for, the Bucs have a little over $9.3 million in cap space. Going to jump over into the live chat real quick before we hit the first break. Alexander says, James, do you follow the Rays? It's almost time. I do not follow the Rays. I kind of stopped watching baseball about 5 years ago. I have been a Boston Red Sox fan for a very, very long time. My dad is a Rays fan. So even though it's that whole division rivalry thing, I always like to see the Rays do well because I know how much my dad loves them. And also, the Boston Red Sox are absolute garbage now. Maybe they'll get better with Theo Epstein coming back into the fold, but they've been trash basically since they won the World Series in 2018, which coincidentally, right after that World Series is when I stopped really paying attention to baseball. So don't follow the Rays, but I follow the Rays if you kind of get what I mean. Narav in the chat says, how do we feel about Chase Young to be a veteran presence on the edge? I know he's injury prone, but maybe as a rotational guy. I actually talked about this. I believe it was on Friday's live. I am not a fan of the idea of bringing in Chase Young. He had really one good season. He called out Tom Brady, and since then, he's been terrible. David Harrison, who used to co-host this show, he hosts Locked On Commanders. He has said for a very long time how overrated Chase Young is. He's going to want a lot of money. He's not worth it. He's not a guy that's going to elevate the rest of the players around him. He is the Robin to somebody else's Batman. That's why he did well in San Francisco, because he was like the number 4 guy when it came to their playmakers and getting after the quarterback. He's not a guy that's going to elevate those around him. So I would steer clear of Chase Young. I think the Bucs will steer clear, mostly because of the financial aspect of that. So I am not a Chase Young guy. If the Buccaneers made a move to get Chase Young, I would understand it. I would talk about it. But me personally, I would try to stay away from him. But did the Bucs get a starting offensive lineman from the New York Giants? Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants joins the show. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you come back tomorrow. We will continue to talk about how this Buccaneers roster is shaping up to look like. But in the meantime, as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Gonna jump back over into the chat real quick because I see the Reaper in there. And yes, I see all of your comments. He says, point proven. Bucs fans don't like named talent. First off, this isn't a fan podcast. Second off, that's all Chase Young is a name. He is not a talent. Once again, he is the Robin to somebody else's Batman. He is not going to elevate anybody on this defense to become a superstar sack kind of guy. He is drastically overrated. And if you don't believe me, go ask David Harrison on Locked On Commanders, the Ohio State fan, David Harrison on Locked On Commanders, and see what his thoughts were on the trade of Chase Young, because I am telling you right now, he was talking to me about how desperately Washington needed to get rid of him for a long time. There are talented players, and then there are names. Chase Young is nothing but a name. So there's a reason he's still sitting out there. But Ben Bredeson is the offensive lineman coming over from New York that is expected to compete for the starting guard or center jobs. I said on Friday, I needed to do a deeper dive on him because that agreement happened 90 seconds before I went live. But I mentioned that it seemed that it would be more likely that he would compete for the guard job rather than the center job. I think Robert Hainsey, unless they draft Powers Johnson out of Oregon, Robert Hainsey is going to be your center next season. So the guard job is the one that really needs to be addressed. And it seems to be a better fit for him. But I wanted to reach out to Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants to see what her thoughts on Bredeson and what he brings to the table in Tampa. And there are very few people out there that are as dialed in with the Giants as Patricia. So I'm going to kick it over to her and have her tell you what the Bucs are getting in Bredeson.
What's up, Tampa Bay fans? My name is Patricia Traina, and I'm the host of Locked On Giants. And I've been asked by James Yarcho to give you a little scouting report on Ben Bredeson, who is the new offensive lineman your team signed. Ben Bredeson is 26 years old. He is 6'5", 311 pounds. Last year for the Giants, he started 8 games at right guard, 4 at left guard, and 4 at center. So he can play any of the 3 interior offensive line positions. Now, the center position is still kind of new for him in that he didn't really play a whole lot at center previously. Bredeson coming to the Giants initially in a trade with the Baltimore Ravens. And prior to last year, I think he had played something like 30 snaps at center. But when John Michael Schmitz, the Giants starting center, got injured, Bredeson moved in at center and kind of held down the fort. Now, what can I tell you about Bredeson? Well, like I said, he's versatile. He can play any of those interior offensive line positions. He's smart. He will battle. He will give you an effort. You will never see the guy taking a play off or not finishing a play to the whistle. As a starter, though, I think he's a little on the sketchy side. And by that, I mean, if you're acquiring him and planning to use him strictly as a backup, I think you'd be fine. As a starter, though, there are some issues with his game. Most notably, he's not the most athletic offensive lineman that you're going to see on your team. He has struggled to hold up against athletic defenders. So, keep matching speed with speed or that athleticism. It's like watching, somebody with poor balance and just no coordination go up against a ballet dancer. That's what it kind of reminds you of, because Bredeson just cannot match his athleticism against some of the more athletic interior offensive linemen that he has faced in his career. Another thing is, probably don't expect him to pull a lot because, again, that athleticism is missing. So he's probably going to just be more of a stationary type. Getting to the second level, he can do it. But again, just the balance and just the lack of athleticism is a big, big concern I would have, in his game. Another thing he struggled with last year, and this was the entire Giants offensive line, so this wasn't just exclusively Bredeson, was with stunts, just picking up those stunts, not necessarily not being able to recognize them, but being able to counter them. And by that, I mean, if a guy did a loop and, Bredeson was set up to block him on the left shoulder, and the guy now is coming at him at the right shoulder, he just had trouble adjusting. And again, I attribute that to the athleticism issues that he had. So that would be the biggest concern I would have about Ben Bredeson. But, overall, he's a good locker room guy. He's going to give you effort. He's pretty durable. He was initially a starter for the Giants at left guard the year prior, but because of the injuries the Giants had on the offensive line, they just had to move him all the way around at different positions. And, some people say, well, he never really made himself at home at one particular position. I just think that his overall game lacks in key areas. And again, if you have to roll with him as a backup, you should be fine. As a long-term starter, I would just be a little bit leery about that. I would keep an eye on that. So I hope that helps you with getting to know Ben Bredeson, your new offensive lineman down there at Tampa. And thank you for this opportunity to come on and talk to you guys.
Big thanks to Patricia for doing that and sending it over to me, because I did think it was important to get her viewpoint on what Bredeson is, and it wasn't quite the ringing endorsement that I kind of expected or that many of you were probably hoping for. But again, no one anointed him as a starter when he came to this agreement with the Buccaneers. The reports were simply that he was going to compete for a starting job. So we go right back to guard or interior offensive line as being one of the bigger needs in the draft in those early rounds. And it's going to be next to impossible for me to come off of edge rusher as the number one need. But this to me means that guard is still right there in the thick of the race for the second biggest need for the team. You can throw in running back, cornerback, wide receiver, linebacker. All of them have a case to be made for them to be the number two need on this roster. But if I'm ranking the top five biggest needs right now, I'm going edge rusher, guard, running back, wide receiver, and cornerback. I think that you have solid starters at running back, obviously at wide receiver and corner, but all of them, all of those position groups could use an upgrade. Mike and Chris are, of course, fantastic. They're fine. But the number three receiver that the Bucs are going to utilize a lot needs an upgrade in a big way. Rachaad White is fine. Chase Edmonds is, I mean, that's okay. But you need an upgrade there. And then you traded away Carlton Davis, and I'm fine with Zion and Jamel being the starting outside corners. Perfectly okay with that. But I would still like to see that position group get better. And whether that means that someone gets drafted to compete with Zion for the starting outside corner, or you get even deeper at one of the weakest position groups from last year, I'm good with that too. Linebacker is probably next on the list for me. I think KJ Britt showed enough to earn that starting job last season, but I also think that you can upgrade over him and then just put him back in kind of a similar rotational role that you saw out of him last year. So I like the Bredeson signing. And if he wins the starting job, that's great. Competition breeds excellence. Iron sharpens iron, all of those things. If he doesn't, that just means that you have more reliable depth with starting experience, all along that offensive line, which of course is always a good thing. It is indeed a mock draft Monday. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I love taking advantage of the flash deals when the event that I'm going to gets closer, but there's no doubt my favorite feature is the view from your seat, so I know exactly what I'm paying for, and I'm not surprised when I get to the venue. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps, and I love being able to use Apple Pay right there on the app to secure my seats. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wrapping things up here on a Monday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And Sal 319 in the chat, stop yelling at me. Calm down with the all caps. He says competing for a starting job was a lie too. He is a roster filler. You don't know that. I don't know that. The plan is he's going to compete for a job. The question is, who is he going to compete with? That's the long and the short of it. Maybe he's a backup. Maybe he ends up being the starter. You don't know. Again, this is a guy with starting experience. He started 16 games for the Giants last season, and who knows how the draft is going to shake out. Maybe they don't get the guard that they are looking to get. they have to wait until day 3 before they get one. And then obviously you would need Bredeson to start at that point. So you just don't know how this is going to shake out. I like the depth. I like the experience. There's no need to yell at people in the chat, mainly me, because you keep typing in all caps. But Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus, you guys know Trevor at Tampa Bay Trey on Twitter, used to write for Pewter Report, has been all over the place. He's on NFL Network. He's on Up and Adams. He's all over the place, making Tampa proud. But he did the most epic mock draft that I have seen yet this year. And whatever we have to do to get the NFL to just make this mock draft the actual draft, we need to figure out what that is. And we all band together and make that happen. So shout out to Roger Goodell, who I know is an everydayer. Please just make this the actual draft. So in this 3-round mock draft from Sikkema, he has the Bucs going with Jared Verse at pick 26, saying, quote, "There aren't many better scenarios for the Buccaneers than somehow coming away with Jared Verse at pick 26. The Florida State product is talented enough to go much higher than this, but after free agency, I can now see him in Latu falling a bit. That doesn't make them any worse as players, though. Verse would be an immediate starter in Tampa Bay." Yes, please. You guys know I'm real big on Jared Verse. I am real big on Chop Robinson. Those are my 2 favorite edge rushers for the Buccaneers in this draft class. And if they have the opportunity to get one of those guys at pick 26, send Trey Palmer with the card to sprint up there as fast as he can, because that would be an amazing pickup for the Buccaneers. But it gets even better. Trevor wasn't done yet. In the 2nd round at pick 57, he goes with Missouri cornerback Enos Rakestra Jr. I'm sorry, what? Then in the 3rd round, Trevor gives the Bucs Boston College guard Christian Mahogany. And at pick 80, or that was at pick 89. At pick 92, the pick that they got from the Detroit Lions in exchange for Carlton Davis and 2 6th-round picks, Michigan running back Blake Corum. That's it. That's a wrap. That's a wrap. The Bucs would walk out of there with the best draft of anyone in just their first 4 picks. You have an immediate plug-and-play impact edge rusher to complement Yaya Diaby and to come in and wreak havoc in a Todd Bowles defense. You have a corner coming in who is projected by some to go as early as the Bucs pick in the 1st round, dropping all the way down to their pick in the 2nd round, who could compete with Zion McCollum as the other starting corner. He is a big, lengthy, physical corner the way Todd Bowles likes him. That's an amazing pick. Then you mean to tell me you get a starting caliber guard out of Boston College and arguably the best running back in the draft in the 3rd round. That's a wrap. It's over. 4 years in a row of NFC South champions. 5 years in a row of playoff appearances. That would be incredible. So now all of you understand why I was saying we all need to band together and force Goodell to just make Trevor's mock draft the actual draft, because if the Bucs come away with this kind of haul, we are going to have a blast on this show talking about the draft. That was well done. And I know I've mentioned it before, that I am real big on Estime, the running back out of Notre Dame, coming in to join Rashad and Chase Edmonds, just because he brings that physicality. He's that bruiser, power back, short yardage situation. Blake Corum, he can do it all. He was incredible to watch at Michigan, and whatever team ends up drafting Corum is going to be very, very lucky. But with the way running backs went in this free agent class, I mean, think about it. The very first agreement was a running back. You had 8 running backs change teams on day 1. I wonder how far the first running back is going to fall in the upcoming draft because so many teams have already addressed their running back needs in free agency. You might have a situation where the first running back doesn't go until the top of the third round because that many teams already addressed the big need there. Now, some of these guys are on, 2-year deals, 3-year deals that are in reality 1-year deals, and they might go ahead and take a running back in the second round just to be able to get into the fold, get prepared, be a rotational player at first, and then take over the starting role next year. But you can argue that Blake Corum is the best running back in the draft, and Trevor has him going to the Buccaneers at 92. I love that. So, going to jump into the chat one more time. Corey in the chat says, Verse will not fall that far. I don't know. In this particular mock draft, I believe he was the third edge rusher off the board behind Latu and Chop. I'm going to have to double check that, but I know he had Latu going ahead of the Bucs pick. But this isn't out of the norm. This isn't like Verse was going top 10 in mock drafts all over the place, and then all of a sudden Trevor has him dropped to 26. We've seen plenty of mock drafts where Verse falls this far because so many other teams are addressing quarterback and wide receiver and offensive line, scooping up all those tackles, starting with Joe Alt, and then all of a sudden you see runs on tackles going. It is not in the slightest out of the realm of possibility that Jared Verse is sitting there at pick number 26 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So you can't say, he won't fall that far because it's absolutely possible. Let's see. And then we have Narav, Keon Coleman in round 2. Maybe. I don't know. I realize that I said wide receiver needs an upgrade. I think there are other positions that I would rather address in the second round, but it all depends on how the board falls. That's really how this all goes. Is you can't pigeonhole one player in, because if that player's gone, then all of a sudden you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And then Realtor David, I was talking about Trevor Sikkema's 3-round mock draft over on ProFootballFocus.com. Go check that out. Trevor always does an absolutely fantastic job. So with that, I am going to bid you all a fair adieu. Please make sure you are coming back tomorrow to check out more coverage about the Buccaneers 5 days a week, all year long. You're only going to get it here at Locked On Bucs. In the meantime, check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, and become a Locked On Bucs insider. Join subtext.com/Locked On Bucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.